Brothers who have finished their sunnats are requested to come closer. Jazakumullah.
Minash-shaytanir-rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Jazakallah everyone for coming and whoever's listening at home. My name is Dr. Aman Tagari. I work at Preston Hospital and
My name is Hashim. I work at Manchester.
And so we've been asked to come and do a talk on healthy Ramadan. So this is part of the BIMA Association, which is British Islamic Medical Association. They provide the slides and the content, and we're not affiliated with any NHS or any pharmaceutical companies. So it's just us trying to deliver sort of important points to the community. We're both local, so inshallah there should be some benefit, even if you take a few bits of information. We'll welcome questions at the end, inshallah. But obviously, for the nature of it, some specific medical questions we won't be able to answer, as sometimes it's quite complex. So we would direct you back to your GP or whoever's your medical professional. So what we're going to talk about why healthy Ramadan. We'll be talking about eating healthily, moving healthily, so exercise, and also some health conditions that you might have, and possibly some general advice about these. I've already said this disclaimer. So I want to talk about a bit about habits, and obviously we're 2 weeks away from Ramadan now, and this is the best time to sort of start thinking about what our Ramadan wants to look like. We always think about from the Islamic point of view, I'm going to increase my salah, I'm going to increase my ibadah, increase zikr, which are all very important points as well. But we also have to think about the health side of things, because if we're not healthy, our ibadah isn't going to be as good, our zikr isn't going to be as good, we're going to be tired throughout the day, and we don't want to be the person that sleeps throughout whole Ramadan, wakes up for Tarawih and iftar and then goes back to sleep. So we want to make sure that we're utilizing most of the time, because even in the Prophet's time, they went through battles when they were fasting. So if they can do things like that, then we should be being proactive during our Ramadan. Specifically, I want to talk about habits. There's a picture of smoking up there, but that's one of the extreme sides of habits. Habits, there can be good habits and bad habits that we've acquired through our lives. Good habits, things like we wake up every morning and we brush our teeth. It's something that comes naturally to us. Now, some of the bad habits, like we mentioned, smoking, some of the other things like eating junk food, eating fizzy drinks, chocolate, sweets, impulsively, and these habits have been acquired through years. It's not something that we just pick up and it becomes a habit over time. It's something that we develop over time. And it can be related to different situations. So maybe smoking or eating junk food. Maybe we've come back from work and we're stressed, and that bit of sugar gives us a bit of a boost, even caffeine, things like that. So habits, they take time to be set in, and on the reverse, they take time to come out of as well. We can't expect to make these changes overnight. It's just not possible. But if we can try throughout this lecture to think about maybe one specific habit, one specific thing that we can try and work on, and then we can make it improve on it over time. Now, there's something called SMART goals, if people have heard of it. It's about how to make your goals specific, as the S is, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. Now, sometimes you might say, let's say for chocolates and sweets, for example, we might say, okay, tomorrow I'm just going to stop eating it. If you've been eating chocolate and sweets for the past 5 years, the way our body is got accustomed to it over time, our dopamine receptors they want it. And so it's not something that's going to be stopped overnight. So if we think about as this lecture goes on, one thing that we maybe do too much of, maybe it's coffee or fatty foods or things like that, and pick one and put a sort of a goal in and try and work through that for the rest of the Ramadan. Now, we always say that the habits we develop in Ramadan, like our ibadah, we should make dua to Allah that it carries on out of Ramadan as well. We can also make the same duas that our physical health improves and our diet improves over Ramadan, and we carry it on as well. I just want to touch on something called health inequalities. As Muslims in this country, especially in these kind of areas, we are we are at a disservice. We are at a point where all the data suggests that if we live in these areas, we're more susceptible, we're more prone to developing sort of heart risks, risks with brain, risk with arteries, risk with our kidneys. And so we are 4-5 times more likely to develop diabetes in these areas, especially with our food and our lifestyles, if a lot of us are South Asian. And it's not really picked up by our community, it's not really picked up by the government and the NHS and schemes. So being aware that, you know, we aren't the target population, it helps us to understand and be able to see what changes we need to make. Even if it's not something that we personally deal with, other people in the family, maybe yourself, you don't have diabetes, but maybe your father does, or some of your relatives do, and being able to educate them as well, maybe they're not here today, is also a good step forward. Now, with the increase that I've mentioned with things like diabetes and heart conditions, it also means that we're over-medicated. We are, as a population, we're taking more medications because of the increase in diseases. And so sometimes it is quite difficult to balance, you know, should we be fasting and things like that. And it's quite a complex, difficult conversation to be had. So basically why we fast, obviously for the Islamic point of view, to please Allah, and it's been ordained by us. But most people fast outside of Ramadan as well. Most people do it for diet, maybe they want to lose weight. So it's good for that. It's good for low cholesterol, helping with blood pressure, helping to reduce the sugars in your body. It also improves mental resilience. I don't know about any of yourselves, but I feel like when I'm in Ramadan and I'm fasting, I feel sort of boosting my productivity. I feel like I can do more work and I get more things done because we're more focused and we're not thinking about food all the time. And again, it can help to control some of the unhealthy habits that we have. So we'll talk a bit about food and eating healthily now. I'll give some advice on the type of foods we should be avoiding and the type of foods that we can be substituting. Now, with habits, the best way to get rid of a bad habit is to replace it with a good habit. And to be quite sensible with what we're going to do and how long and what we're going to achieve. It says in the Quran in Surah Nahl that, so eat of the lawful and good food which Allah has provided you and be grateful for the favours of Allah. And it's an important point to look after our bodies. So this is something called the Eat Well plate. It's kind of a pie of the type of foods we should be eating and the type of foods in what proportion. And a bit of basic science, after we eat, after 8 hours after we eat, our body goes into sort of a fasting state. All the food that we have in our body gets absorbed, all the nutrients gets put into our body. Now after that, all the nutrients have gone from the food we've eaten, then the body starts to find other sources of trying to get energy throughout the day. So it starts to use up our own body supply of glucose that we have. Once it's used up all that, then it starts to break down some of the fats that we have in our body and uses that for sort of an energy source. We can use to our advantage something called complex carbohydrates. Now these are simply the things on the screen: chickpeas, brown rice, whole wheat pasta, oatmeal, sweet potatoes. Compared to normal carbohydrates that are basically sugars, that we eat it and we get a massive spike in our sugars, and it gives us a bit of energy maybe for 20-30 minutes, and then our energy comes down again and we feel sort of the crash. These types of foods give us energy throughout a longer period because they take time to be broken down, and so it gives the body a constant source of energy for that amount of period. Generally, when we're talking about healthy eating, there's two things that we can try and work on. That's reducing our salt intake and trying to reduce the amount of simple carbohydrates that we have and try and substitute it for some of these complex carbohydrates. So there's a lot of foods here that are high in salt: deli meats, canned salmon, hot dogs, which we don't really eat much of here, and crisps. We should try and substitute things for either putting less salt in our food or maybe substituting for things that have less salt in it. a simple drop of 6 grams of salt can reduce your blood pressure by about 10 points. Now, for someone that's got high blood pressure, that can be quite a good drop without being medicated. So simple changes in our diet does have a good impact on our health as well. An important point that only I learned about was things like mushrooms and tomatoes. We can add them to our meals, which gives a bit of a savoury and salty substitute to actually putting salt in. So we can try that. It might be a good tip to put mushrooms or tomatoes inside of our food instead of, you know, dosing it with salt. A lot of the foods that we eat as well, a lot of butters, a lot of the dals, a lot of the curries that we eat have a lot of fat in it. And we know that an increase in the fat that we eat can get deposited into our arteries. It can clog the arteries. It can put us at an increased risk of heart attacks and strokes. And also, a lot of us do have sort of high cholesterol with sort of the things that we eat. So a lot of butters, ghees, full-fat dairies, biscuits, all of these are quite high in fats. Simple alternatives that we can use can be sort of olive oils, canola, and rapeseed. Now, this is a good alternative. It's a lot healthier, but again, use it in moderation. A lot of everything can be bad for you as well. Simple things as well, reducing the amount, grilling, baking, or air frying, again, is a good option. And choosing less processed meat. Try to use more fresh meat as well. So, sugar as well is quite an important point. We should be more attentive to what we're putting into our bodies, having a look at the packaging, seeing how much sugar. If there are sugar-free alternatives, try them. And trying things that have lower GI carbs. So lower GI carbs is, GI stands for glycemic index, and these are quite good in, again, providing you with a long amount of energy throughout the day rather than sort of a quick spike in energy. And these are sort of the things that, you know, fresh fruits, some of the grains, chickpeas, and a lot of vegetables are good alternatives. Now, we're not saying to completely take everything away and just add these in. We're saying to be moderate in our proportions. Like the plate that we saw before, trying to be equal in the amount of foods that we're eating, not just too much of one thing. And low meats as well. So again, trying to substitute for more fresh meats. As the picture shows, try and adjust portion sizes. Instead of too much meat, try and add a bit more vegetables to it. Maybe having some days where you switch between vegetable options of the food and meat options. And also trying to switch between sort of half of the meat and half of pulses, like beans and fresh legumes as well. These are good options in trying to reduce the amount of meats that we put in. As we know, too much of the meat can cause things like strokes, heart attacks, diabetes, and again, it can clog up the arteries and make you more susceptible to some of these things. These are some sort of recipe ideas, things that we can try and do throughout the day. So you can read that and have an idea of some of the things that we can be eating, sort of fresh fruits, bananas, cheese, eggs, porridge, oats. All of these will give you energy throughout the day rather than sort of high sugar cereals. And iftar as well is quite an important thing to mention. We should try and take our time with eating. We shouldn't rush to eat the food. And to explain how the body works when we're eating, once we have the first amount of food that goes in, there's a hormone that gets released, I think called leptin, and it basically tells our body to stop being hungry. Now, the quicker we eat, that hormone doesn't have enough time, and so we just keep on eating and eating and eating until that hormone kicks in and says, you know what, I'm not really hungry anymore. But by that time, you've eaten so much food. So if we pace ourselves to eat, it gives us more good portion control, and that hormone can kick in, and we can feel like we're, quite satiated and quite full, even after maybe small amounts of meals. And this is quite good for people that are trying to lose weight as well. with water intake is quite an important thing during Ramadan. I remember maybe 10 years back, it was a lot hotter in the summer and it was a bit more difficult, especially with the heat. Now it's a bit cooler, it should be a bit easier with our water intake, but they recommend about 2 litres of water throughout the day. So after iftar, a few glasses of water. During Tarawih, a lot of people take bottles, which is a good idea. Just frequent sips over time before we go to bed, and also just before Sahri as well, just to try and make sure we're having enough water. It helps us with our tiredness, helps us not feeling dehydrated, and maybe some people are more prone to headaches. It can help throughout the day. Now I wanted to add this, which is an important aspect that a lot of people with our colour skin is overlooked, especially by GPs and hospitals. One thing that I do recommend mainly is vitamin D supplements. The other two, so omega-3, which we get from fish, and magnesium, which can be from spinach, whole meal breads and nuts, we normally can get through our diet, so we don't need that much of a supplementation from. But vitamin D, even the NHS recommends everyone between October and March, when there's no sunlight, it's good to have sort of daily vitamin D tablets that we can take as supplements. Now the amount is 400 IU throughout the day. You can take them weekly or twice a week, once every 2 weeks, which might be easier for some people. But it normally comes from sunlight, and with this time of year, we don't get enough sunlight. And even throughout the year, you'll find, even my experience in hospital, most of the patients that come in have vitamin D deficiencies. And it's because we don't get enough sunlight, we don't go out often enough, we're stuck inside all day, at offices, at work, and by the time we get home, it's dark already. And especially with our colour skin as well, we have darker skin, and so it's more difficult for the sunlight to get absorbed. So we're at a bit of a disadvantage in this country. Vitamin D helps in, you might feel sort of tired all the time, can help in boosting your productivity, making you feel less tired, having more energy. The same with omega-3 and magnesium. Magnesium is good for improving your sleep, and omega-3 is quite good in reducing sort of heart complications, improves your circulation, and reducing some of the fats and the triglycerides that we have in our body. And all of these together can increase our mood as well. This is a quick overview that the BMJ, which is one of the medical journals, put together. This is specifically for people with diabetes. There's a lot to go through, but I'll touch on just maybe a few points. Most people that have diabetes, they might not be on medications, and so with normal diet control, some people are fine to fast, and some people don't have any issues with that. Now, the way that it gets a bit more complicated is when you are on tablets with diabetes or any other maybe heart conditions. Maybe you had a previous stroke in the past and you're on blood thinners. It's a bit more difficult to say, yes, you should be fasting, yes, you shouldn't, or no, you shouldn't be fasting. It's a personal choice, as well as speaking to your health professional, maybe with a stroke consultant or a diabetes specialist or your GP. They know more about your condition, more about what's going on, and they can advise you on maybe alternatives to fasting, which my colleague Hashim will discuss in a few slides. That concludes the healthy eating. So like I said, if you can pick one thing that you can try and reduce and take that, make a SMART goal out of it, say, you know, I'm going to try and reduce my fizzy drink intake starting from tomorrow. Maybe I drink every day. Maybe this time I'll do every other day, or I'll switch to a zero calorie, zero sugar option, and try and be sensible with how long it's going to take you to quit these habits.
Assalamu alaikum. So we've kind of touched on healthy eating and how we can kind of implement that into our lives, hopefully, as Ramadan approaches. I just wanted to touch a little bit on moving healthy. So what sort of activities can we bring into our life, not just in Ramadan, but also hopefully when Ramadan ends, what sort of things can we do to keep that increased? So as Aman mentioned earlier, one factor that might be helpful to motivate us to move is that in the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba, the Prophet, when there'd be times when they'd be in battles, and they would also be fasting. Those are not such situations these days. However, it can be used to some extent to help us think about increasing our movements. There's many benefits, associated with movements. For example, it can help you with your digestion. Even simple strength exercises like going to the gym, walking on the treadmill can help to increase your mood and also help to increase your strength as well. We've just got some points here from the NHS guidelines, so not just related to Ramadan, but in everyday life as well, what sort of exercise is recommended by the NHS. So they recommend that at least 2 times a week you have some sort of strengthening exercise which targets all of your major muscle groups. So you've got your hips, your back, your abdomen, your chest, your shoulder and your legs as well. This can be seen as either 150 minutes of moderate exercise or 75 minutes of more intense, more vigorous activity. Rather than having that exercise, that 150 minutes all in one day, it can be useful to split that up, break it up over 45 days, maybe 2 days on the weekend, 2 days during the week, to kind of make that easier for you to reach that goal. Aside to the exercise as well, another goal you can kind of have in your mind is to try and hit 10,000 steps a day. I believe many mobile phones these days, they do have the health app, which can help you to target, to see if you're hitting your 10,000 steps. Going towards Ramadan, we've got some ideas here that we can implement in terms of Ramadan. How can we get more movement into our days? So these are good alternatives to getting a membership at the gym. So in one sense helps you to save a bit of money as well. You can do some light exercises before your suhoor, again also before your iftar as well, because you'll know that very soon I'll be able to eat or drink. You can walk to and from the masjid. So if you're away from work and you're having the chance to pray 5 times in the mosque, you can walk to and from the masjid, praying extra salah. Again, there'll be Taraweeh being prayed each night as well, inshallah, so that's a good opportunity to implement some sort of exercise, and also doing some stretching after Taraweeh as well. As mentioned on the slide as well, it's good to exercise immediately after your suhoor and your iftar, because it helps you then target the calories that you've just put on from consuming the iftar or sahri. That's that one. And now if you go a bit onto health conditions, so in terms of the British Islamic Medical Association, they kind of have created a summary on their website which you can access online, regarding if you have any medical conditions and what their advice is regarding fasting or not, whether you should be fasting. However, it is quite important to note that there isn't one rule that fits all. It's not necessary that if you have diabetes, if you have a certain heart condition, that you all of a sudden just stop your fasting. It has to be taken on an individual basis. It might be worthwhile, as we have a bit of time leading up to Ramadan, you could maybe attempt to fast in these coming days to see how you feel alongside your medical condition. Again, this is just advice, so based on your individual condition, it can be beneficial to go to your actual health practitioner to see what they advise you as well. Again, you need to remember that fasting during Ramadan is a choice. If you have a condition, it's not one rule, as I said, that you shouldn't fast or should fast during this month. Do you want to go on that link?
Yes. Can I quickly show you? So, this is the document that they made. It's quite a long one, and you can have a look and read of it and discuss this with your healthcare professional as well. But it says risk stratification. So they put you into a low, high, or very high risk. And you can have a look at the different things that are in each section. If you're in a high risk or a very high risk, the advice is you probably shouldn't fast. And if you really do want to, then it's very worthwhile to get in touch with your healthcare professional so you can discuss, like Hashim mentioned, ways in which you can fast. So maybe you can try shorter fasts, maybe you can try alternate days to fast, or a trialing period throughout the next 2 weeks to see how you do cope. And people in low risk, like I mentioned, things like if you have hypertension, maybe you have diabetes and it's well under control just with diet and exercise, you'd be in the low risk. You're not taking any medications, you're not reliant on it. So you can make some adjustments throughout the day, throughout the fast, and maybe an iftar and suhoor, trying to change up a bit of your diet. So it's quite an extensive list. It has everything from neurological diseases, kidney diseases, respiratory, heart, and basically every condition you can think of. So it's a good idea if you want to have some time to have a look at where, if you do have a medical condition, where you do fit in, and have a think about if you do want to continue fasting.
Okay. So when it comes to Ramadan, obviously there are medical conditions that we are currently discussing. It often comes to hearing that some people, again, obviously because you are fasting, you don't take your medications. For example, if you do have diabetes and you're on your anti-diabetic medications, you decide that because I'm fasting, I'll skip taking these medications. However, it's quite important to know, although Ramadan, alhamdulillah, is a very blessed time of the year, it isn't going to be a treatment for your condition. The medications that we do take for these conditions are, for example, listed on the slide, are there to help us control, worsening those conditions, and that can then lead on to worsening complications. So it's a point to kind of think about. So if you're fasting, you do have conditions, do I, in a sense, stop my medications? Do I take them? Again, worth discussing with your doctor, with your practitioner as well. We have some tips that are listed here on the slide, which can be, help you to go through a healthy Ramadan. So, for example, just list a few. If you break your fast slowly and not to eat excessively, you can open your fast with some dates, pray your Maghrib Salah, and then you can go back to, opening your fast. As Aman mentioned earlier as well, reducing certain high sugar, high fat foods, and also implementing more high fiber into your diet. The caffeine one as well, yeah. So to minimize your regular tea and coffee as much as possible, true, because as you lead up to Ramadan, if you are someone that's quite used to drinking tea and coffee, a sudden decrease can lead to you feeling worse and having headaches, because you do become quite reliant on that. So it'll be a good tip to kind of work towards that now, to slowly reduce your caffeine intake. So yeah, as we covered, we kind of just went over what sort of things you can implement from now leading up to Ramadan in terms of eating healthily, and also kind of just think about what sort of actions we can implement to move more, not just in Ramadan, but also as we come out of Ramadan, to then, continue getting our steps in, walking to the masjid when possible. And then we also kind of touched on how we balance having a health condition in Ramadan, and where we sit in terms of, do we stop our medications, or the importance of continuing taking those anti-diabetic, anti-hypertensive meds if you're on those. Cool.
And that's all I think we've had to say. Inshallah, it was useful. I picked up a few things that maybe you can try and implement. So is there any questions anyone would like to ask, or maybe discuss afterwards? Yes, brother, back. Assalamu alaikum.
If someone can't fast because of the medical reason and advised by the healthcare professional, does he or she need to pay any fine or like that kind of things? Because physically he or she cannot.
Obviously, I'm not a scholar or ulama, so I can pass this one off to Maulana or.
So, if the condition is such that they're not going to get better, and there's no hope of them getting better, if they won't even be able to fast the short ones in December and November, then they will keep fitted. But if they're not able to keep the long ones and they keep the shorter ones, like 10-hour ones, between 6 and 10, then they should try to make them on the short.
December, okay.
Yeah. I like the advice, like you can do alternative days. So you fast one day, miss two, fast one day, so then you don't have that many because of circulation.
Good questions. Okay, jazakallah everyone for attending. Inshallah we can try and implement some of these going forwards.
Jazakallah as well to yourselves.